Good afternoon. Welcome to the Friday edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's state government reporters.
And woo, dang, what a week.
I mean, we say that a lot.
But really, for real.
Yeah, this was a big one. We had the budget. We had the party switch that is kind of the biggest bombshell to hit North Carolina politics that I can readily remember.
Since Michael Decker.
It's been a while.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, we've had a couple of legislators change parties over the years, like Brisson, for example, Tyne. But a party shift that was so momentous last time that happened was Michael Decker and helping Jim Black way back in, I think, 2001, maybe.
20 years ago, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. So anyway, Tricia, if you've been under a rock, we'll just back up for a second. Tricia Cotham announcing this week that she's switching to the Republican Party, coming from Democratic, basically royalty. I mean, the Cothams well known in Mecklenburg County as strong Democrats and nationally as well. Her mom was a DNC member. Just a big surprise, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah, and from a 60% Democratic district. So elected as a Democrat in November of 2022. That's several months ago. And now is a Republican and voted with the Republicans on various budget measures this week. And we'll see going forward what that means. I mean, so there was a list of names when the session started of people that we thought, these are Democrats who might help the Republicans get that one vote they need to override Governor Roy Cooper's veto. Cotham was on some of those lists. Cotham was not on some other people's list. But she took a walk, or at least was not present, for the gun bill override.
Right.
And was one of three to do it. So at that point, it was kind of like, okay, this is exactly what Speaker of the House Tim Moore described. This is a working supermajority. Republicans can overturn a number of things. If they can overturn a gun bill, they can do a lot of things. And then Cotham just decided to go all the way with it. I think she took a lot of flack for not being there for that gun vote. And to hear her describe it, had been taking flack from Democrats prior to that as well. And it just kind of became enough to say, you know what, I'm a Republican now.
Well, there was a litany of grievances, for sure. Rumors, being told not to come to caucus, although we have to say, we talked to Robert Reeves, the head of the caucus, and he said that a lot of these things are simply not true. She had claimed, for example, that he hadn't talked to her, but he said he had a whole list of text messages from her on his phone. They'd been conversing back and forth. So, I mean, obviously, this is a little bit he said, she said. She said, so the breaking point was when she was told that not to use the flag and praying hands emojis on her social media.
Emojis figured way more into this story than I had expected. And a lot of the things she said, she didn't say who said it. She did not clarify whether it was Democratic leadership or another Democratic legislator or some rando on Twitter or some constituent. It just was like this whole list of grievances of people mistreating her and treating her poorly. She said that she was told not to come to the Democratic caucus. She didn't say at what point, i.e., was it after the gun bill vote or before? It seemed like it was before, but she also said she only went to one caucus. She said she went to the first caucus of the year, and that was it. She was pretty upset that she was treated like a freshman, she said.
Yeah, that was certainly a theme that we heard a lot about.
Because she served, 10 years or 8 years, something like that?
9, yeah.
Prior to that, left to run for Congress, did not win, came back this most recent cycle, and was assigned a mentor, she said, just like all the kind of newbies. That sense felt like an insult to her, obviously.
Sure, and it's something that we should point out that the Republicans did not do with their returning legislators. I think you noted that Gray Mills came back and was treated as if he had never left. And so it is a mystery to me why that decision was made, but it certainly seems to have been an unwise one in retrospect.
And she felt like she indicated Democratic women treated her poorly, told her what to wear, told her hair was too long. Quote,
well, hold on. There are days when they pick a color to wear because of whatever's going on. I don't know that necessarily equates to being told what and what to not wear, but
again, it was the kind of thing where you hear her say it, and then you think, well, wait, what exactly are you talking about here? It's not clear. And I mean, how many people told you your hair was too long? It was a lot.
You said it. It was a lot.
We've talked about this, you and I kind of. We don't know exactly what's true. I wish we did, folks. Wish I could tell you exactly without a doubt.
Yeah.
But I think that what she's saying, the kind of thing she's saying, is going to play with the broader public to the extent the broader public follows the North Carolina House of Representatives, which, come on,
It certainly fits in with the narrative that's really dominant on Fox News and right-wing media right now, that the Democrats are intolerant.
Right. And I mean, there's going to be groupthink in any party. That's kind of why a political party exists. But I do think the Democrats are really in danger of leaning too far into that and losing people. I mean, that's, it's that constant push and pull of, we have these closely held ideals versus we want a big tent party that can get people elected. And I heard zero introspection from North Carolina Democrats this week over this Cotham situation. And even if you think it's her fault and not the party's fault, like zero introspection? Is that the right amount of introspection? Zero? I don't know. I don't know about that.
I will say that to some extent, I think I can imagine, I'm just hypothesizing here, but to the extent that top-down control has been too heavy-handed, you have to think about where they've been for the past few years. They had 7 votes to go to hold a veto, and they had a couple votes to go to hold a veto, and now they're down to 1 vote to go. So,
which they were never going to hold.
Right, but I'm just saying, you can kind of see why they might be dropping the hammer more on their members than they had in the past, because every vote really does count. The math is just so tight. That certainly doesn't make it okay, and it certainly doesn't help their case when people are leaving their party because of it.
It's a pretty top-down party, too. I mean, Governor Roy Cooper keeps a pretty strong hold on the Democratic Party in North Carolina. Morgan Jackson, at Nexus Strategies, that is like the primary consulting group. I mean, it's a pretty top-down structure, although we did see Anderson Clayton, the new Democratic Party chair. She was not Roy Cooper's choice. She was not the establishment's choice.
And she won.
But I also think it's interesting, if you look at the things Clayton said afterwards, it was very much a circling the wagons, resign, Tricia Cotham, whereas Roy Cooper's statement afterward was along the lines of, we still need her vote. We need her vote on election issues. We need her vote on LGBTQ issues. We need her vote to block new abortion restrictions. Please, Tricia Cotham, do not abandon these long-held principles. Please continue to vote them, even if you have an R by your name now. Whereas the trumpet call from the party itself was, you need to resign, which you can understand. I mean, you get elected in a 60% district, like you said, 5 months ago, and you're like, I'm actually a Republican.
Wait, what?
I can think of 60% of your constituents who would not be pleased by that.
I've had so many emails from people asking me, is this legal? Can we do this?
Right.
Can we recall her? The answer is yes, and no. She can do this. Yes, it's legal. You don't sign a contract when you get elected. You could argue that you have a sort of common contract. You're making promises, but nobody says you can't, and it certainly can't be recalled. We don't have recall in North Carolina,
and they're going to redraw, or at least try to redraw House seats. So presumably she will have a seat drawn for her in the next cycle.
That will be a little bit more hospitable.
Yeah, that will be much more hospitable for her. And we talk about how she's going to vote going forward. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll quote her from the press conference. The party that best represents me and my principles is the Republican Party. Read into that what you will. Read into that also that she voted with Republicans on every Democratic budget amendment that failed. So the House was doing its budget this week. Obviously, Republicans wrote that budget. Democrats wanted to change a number of things, put amendments forward. The ones that failed, she voted against every one of them. So she's voting with the Republicans there, including on an amendment that would have removed funding for pregnancy centers. I don't know exactly how to describe them, but
crisis pregnancy centers are basically they're meant to be alternatives to abortion clinic to help women.
They're kind of anti-abortion health clinics for women who are pregnant.
Right.
And the $11.2 million, something like that, would have been moved away from them. She voted against that amendment. What exactly that is a window into for abortion going forward, I can't say, but.
She was asked about this at the press conference, about what she would say to her constituents, about what her positions would be, and she kind of had it both ways. She kind of said, I haven't changed. I'm still the same person I was yesterday, but at the same time, I have it's okay to evolve on some things. I have to pray about it. I talk to consult my conscience about it. So I don't think it's clear at all which way she's likely to vote.
Right. I mean, everything's raw right now. And I want to correct myself. It said she voted against all those amendments. She either voted against them or had an excused absence. So she did not vote or voted against them. I want to correct that. It's once things settle down, and the Easter break, which is next week, they're kind of taking a spring break. The House and Senate won't be there. It's coming at a real good time because there is a lot of exposed nerves, a lot of anger, a lot of hurt feelings right now, and those things can tip over into a really bad situation quickly. So it's probably for the best, and I wonder if it was purposely timed.
Well, and I think it was also illustrative that before the day that this all came out, the sergeants at arms in the House were moving her desk from the Democratic side to the Republican side before she even came into the chamber.
Right.
So they were anticipating some bad blood. And Reeves said, he insisted that there's not bad blood. He says, we're moving on. We're not going to get embroiled in this. But, certainly down the street, Anderson Clayton was singing a completely different tune. We certainly did check in with the other Democrats that have been rumored to be considering a party switch, and that would be Michael Ray, Cecil Brockman. Who did you talk to?
Ray. I spoke to Ray. He said he's sticking with the Democratic Party. Brockman put out a statement saying
same thing,
that he's sticking with the Democratic Party.
But he has problems with the way that it's being run.
Right. And the way that Cotham has been treated in the aftermath here. He says that points at it and says, look, you don't see it? This is why. And the Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, says that he's talking to other Democrats. I mean, he's going to keep saying that for the rest of the session, but he got one, so.
Yeah, that's all he needed, really. But depending on how she votes.
Depending on how she votes, but.
Yeah. Anyway, so in other things happening this week, and there was a lot, the House got its budget through. Top lines, 10% raises for teachers, average 7.5 for state employees.
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years, we should say. Sorry about that. A whole lot of changes, a lot of policy in here.
Yeah, there's a good bit of education policy. So there's a new process for parents who want to ban books from the classroom or other classroom materials. It kind of standardizes it across the state. There is a new standard course of study commission. So basically an appointed commission that would suggest here's what everybody should learn in school. And then it submits it to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education can't change it, but it can reject it. Then the new commission gets another chance.
But doesn't the State Board of Education do the standards?
Yes, and ultimately the State Board of Education, now the State Board of Education does, and ultimately they retain that authority. But the process is so that the new commission submits it, Board of Education can't change it, but if they reject it, it goes back to the commission. Commission tries again. If the board rejects it again, then the board just writes it. That's my reading of that language.
Okay.
And then also teachers will have to post a whole bunch of stuff to the internet.
Right.
Basically anything they're going to teach or any material they're going to use would have to go to the internet. There was an attempt by Democrats to add $200 million to the budget to say, okay, let's give every county or every school district, maybe it was, a liaison to make sure this happens. And because this is extra work we're putting on teachers. I think Representative, I believe it was Amber Baker, forgive me if I'm confusing my Democrats here, saying, You've required 22 new things of teachers, so let's give them some help. That was rejected, so that was obviously a Democratic effort too.
Well, teachers don't have enough to do.
Right.
Right. Anyway, one thing that we'd mentioned before, this is interesting, the SBI move.
Yeah, that got taken out.
Yeah, because, it's a study. It's a study now, which is, I think, what some people were really kind of pushing for, saying this was moving a little bit too quickly. Now, of course, we still, at this point, it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate rewrites it. Basically, they're supposed to amend it, but what they're going to do is come up with their own version of it. And so we'll have to see if that shows up in the Senate version of it.
Yeah, the idea was to move the State Bureau of Investigation from under the AG to the Department of Public Safety and make it a little bit more autonomous. It's already pretty autonomous.
There were complaints by Bob Schirmeyer last week at a hearing,
director.
2 weeks ago at a hearing, that the Cooper administration was too closely involved in hires and fires and had threatened him with an investigation. Apparently, there were complaints by some in the department about the way that advancement worked, how people were being preferred over other people, the kind of things that happen in pretty much any government agency. But of course, with the SBI, it's super important that they be autonomous because they're the ones who investigate all the campaign fraud, all the corruption charges.
Right. And so Christy Jones, who is Roy Cooper's chief of staff, sent a letter today basically saying, hey, we had all these kind of complaints against Schurmeyer. People coming to us saying he's discriminating. What do you want us to do? You want us to just ignore that? So the question at the SBI kind of continues to be, all right, well, did the Cooper administration put undue pressure on this guy, or did the Cooper administration put due pressure on this guy? And we just really do not know the answer to that because of the way state personnel laws are.
That's true.
Real quickly on the state budget, I'll mention there's a new $2,000 adoption tax credit. I don't know that got a lot of coverage, but that's interesting. The judicial retirement change, moving the age from 72 to 76, which helps Chief Justice Paul Newby remain on the court longer, kind of strengthens that Republican majority they have going forward. That's in the House budget. What's next? 9 Democrats voted yes on that budget, plus Tricia Cotham, who is now a Republican. But I'll note, if you're playing along at home, if you look the votes up, she's still listed as a Democrat in the House clerk's office because it won't change there until it changes at her local board of elections. She apparently has mailed the paperwork, so there's just some paperwork there, but she's going to continue to be listed as a Democrat in
until
votes.
that goes through.
Until that goes through. The Senate's going to change things, as you said. I assume one of those things will be the deeper personal income tax cuts that they announced.
They rolled those out this week, actually. Of course, nobody had any time to do anything much with them because we were all, running around like chickens with our heads cut off. But they are talking about trying to accelerate some of the tax cuts that are already scheduled to be taking place in the personal income tax.
And go further, down below 3% in the next several
Yep.
years on the personal income tax rate. They also will almost certainly put more opportunity scholarship money in there. They want to take that program. This is the private school voucher program that already exists, up to $500 million by 2030. I can't remember what year it is, but
And there's also a likelihood that they are going to be refiguring the raises because they've made it pretty clear that they feel that the state employees need to be getting as much as the teachers do because they feel like the teachers legitimately, when you look at the raises over the past few years, the teachers have clearly been prioritized, and for good reason, right? We had teacher shortages, but now we have state employee shortages too.
right. And with the state employee raise, like you said, 10% versus 7.5% over 2 years on average. There's a bunch of money in the House budget for targeted state employee raises. Troopers, for example, highway patrol troopers would get like 17%. Other kind of hard to fill jobs, there's extra money for agencies to try to. So it's tough to kind of balance it all out to one or two numbers. But the Senate has made it clear they want those numbers closer.
Other interesting stuff this week that was moving, boards and commissions. This is a big one. Senate Bill 512, this went through the Senate this week on a fast track. It was, I think, unveiled, Tuesday?
Monday.
Okay.
Passed the Senate Thursday. So
so moving right along. So this is another one of those attempts to take away a lot of Governor Cooper's appointment powers to boards that run a lot of things like transportation, the Utilities Commission, et cetera. This would almost certainly be headed for a court case, simply because there's a long history of sort of tension between the executive branch and the legislative branch over appointments and who, and there's a long history of litigation and a lot of different opinions about that. So I wrote about this back in, I think it was February.
You wrote a broad story on it.
A long story about it. But if you want to learn the whole history of it for at least the last few decades, go there. But it feels to me like it is teed up, basically, to put the question of appointments and the balance of power back before the new court.
That makes sense. Senator Warren Daniel, who's the sponsor on this bill, said, we think our bill is constitutional under existing precedent or opens issues that were not dealt with in existing precedent. So exactly what you just said.
Exactly. So, this is an opportunity to let the new Republican-dominated board reconsider some of the items that have been ruled on in the past.
Yeah, McCrory v. Berger was kind of the big decision on this. And who was the lone dissenting justice in that 6-1 decision?
It was Newby.
It was Chief Justice Paul Newby. Now, he did dissent in part and agree in part. But they're clearly trying to reopen that one.
Yep. Other interesting stuff that happened this week. There's a long list. I won't go into too much detail, but the very day that became official that Tricia Cotham was going to be the 72nd vote, giving the GOP House a supermajority, giving supermajority in both chambers, legislators filed a total of 6 bills targeting LGBTQ folks and
Right.
especially trans youth. And so, in a way, this isn't really surprising because we've seen these bills in so many legislatures already this year and last year. There's, I think, more than 430 bills have been filed nationwide so far this year, and it's just April. So, it wasn't a surprise to that community, but, it certainly was disheartening. One of the ones that is probably the more talked about is the one that would ban transgender girls from girls' sports teams. And that was one that got a press conference yesterday. We covered that. You can find that on WRAL and NC Capital. But another one that would go quite a long way would ban gender-affirming treatment for trans youth. And those are actually bills that are like that are under litigation in a bunch of other states that have passed them.
Yeah, and I think ultimately this will all get rolled into the broader national fight about with litigation. The Biden administration made some moves this week on dealing with sports. Here we go, kind of, right? It's full on culture war time. We're going to do this.
As somebody pointed out to me, it's a lot like 2013. That was when the Republicans took the governor's mansion as well as both houses, supermajorities, and that was when we saw sort of just a flood of sort of culture war issues really hitting the tracks. And I think we can expect to see something very similar.
Yeah, we've also got a bill that moved this week, changing absentee ballot rules. Right now, you got 3 days, as long as you're postmarked by Election Day, 3 days for your ballot to arrive. This would cut that off and say, nah, your ballot's got to be at your local Board of Elections by 7:30 p.m. on Election Day. It also says that ballots, if you bring them in by hand, because you don't have to mail them if you don't want to, but if you bring them in by hand, you have to take it to the Board of Elections office itself. You couldn't turn it in at a one-stop early voting site in the 17 days or whatever it is of early voting that we have.
That's interesting. A bill that was filed this week and heard in one committee, this is Senator Jarvis's bill, would change car inspections. And so basically it would do away with emissions inspections for every county except Mecklenburg, and it would reduce the frequency of car safety inspections from every year to every other year for most cars. And then for cars up to 3 years old, they wouldn't have to do them at all for either one. What Senator Jarvis says about this is that they have looked at the data for states that do this biannually versus states that do this annually. They have not seen a change in the crash rates. So they believe that this is not going to have an effect on car safety either way on the highways. Obviously, some folks in other parts of the government are not so sure about that. And so, I think there have been pushes for a long time to reduce inspections. And I think for the emissions part of it, they can probably make that argument simply because the EPA has a cutoff point and every county except Mecklenburg has now been below it for the required time to do away with emissions. But on the other hand, when we're all dealing with climate change and greenhouse gases, is this really the time?
Well, and I'm going to get personal here. I am tired of my check engine light coming on the month that I need to get that thing, and they can't find a problem. It's just the check engine light's on, so I fail. That's super annoying.
Yeah, it's true, and it certainly makes it difficult to keep older cars on the road.
Right, and I predict this bill will be popular with everyone except for the people who own an emissions or safety inspections location.
Possibly so.
Speaking of transportation, S354, this is a bipartisan bill to change the way we fund transportation a little bit. They did last year, I think it was, up to $600 million in the coming years of the sales tax on just any normal purchase will shift over to transportation. We're worried about the gasoline tax not helping us build enough roads. This bill, S354, has a 50 or 25 cent tax on Uber, Lyft, ride shares. It also ups the cap on toll roads. Right now, state law says you can't have more than 3 of those projects in the state. This would go to 6. It raises the electric vehicle annual fee. It adds a new $90 fee on hybrid vehicles, eliminates the $2,000 cap on your vehicle purchase tax, the tax you pay when you buy a vehicle. So that means at about $67,000, you would owe more taxes. Truck drivers are worried about that, because a big rig, if you're a small business that has, and your small business is you're a truck driver, you're about to get hit with that tax. I expect this bill to morph, but it will also be kind of a significant one going forward.
And it is. I mean, when you think about it, this is a bipartisan bill, and it's, Republicans here are actually sort of putting their name on new taxes and new fees. But it is a recognition of, the reality that transportation experts have been telling lawmakers about for a long time, which is, as we get more and more hybrids and EVs on the roads, there's less and less gas tax coming in. And, eventually we're going to run out of money for roads.
And not just hybrids and EVs, but I mean more fuel efficiency too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. One more auto bill I should mention. There's a bill that's going to be heard when they come back from break that would increase the coverage that you would have to carry on your car insurance. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because think about those levels like 30, 50, 100 or whatever it is. We've had those forever, right? I mean, but the prices of things have gone up, right?
Yeah.
Prices of cars have gone up. So they're talking about raising those limits, those minimum amounts that you have to have, which will also probably make your insurance more expensive.
Cool.
Yay, that, right?
Tell us about the bill with the psychedelic. This I think kind of got lost in the shuffle of the week, but is it a John Autry bill?
Well, it's John Autry, but it also has backing from Republicans, including Chesser. Sasser is on it as well. This is a bill that would basically pave the way for research trials to begin for MDMA or ecstasy and psilocybin, which are also called mushrooms, to be used in what they call psychedelic assisted therapy. And if that sounds weird, well, maybe, but it also seems to be working pretty well in states where they're doing these trials.
In like real studies.
In real studies. And we're talking about veterans with PTSD that are getting treated with MDMA and seeing, huge relief in their symptoms after one round of treatment. They don't have to take this every day, right? This isn't something that you have to do continuously. This is like a cure, as Chesser put it in the press conference. And they say, right now, North Carolina law would not allow even a trial for those drugs. So they want to carve that out to allow that. So the FDA has already approved both of these in limited applications, and they're thinking that the FDA is probably going to approve it for real in the next couple of years. And so they say it's time to get North Carolina ready so that when it is approved, we can be offering it to veterans.
That's an interesting one. I was interested to see if it picks up much support. I also want to mention the Gabe Torres Act. This is named after a police officer who was killed going to work. He wasn't at work yet, but in the Hedingham.
Yeah, that was the Hedingham shooting. And basically what happened is his family was not eligible for a death benefit because he was not on the clock. He was on his way to work.
Right.
So, it's weird. The law right now says if you're on your way to or from training, you're covered. But it doesn't say if you're on your way to or from work. So what they're wanting to do is to add that to that law and then make it retroactive so that it would apply so his family could receive the death benefit as well.
Yeah, and surely that one's gonna move.
Who's going to vote against that?
Senate Bill 303 is a bill that kind of tinkers with juvenile privacy in criminal safety in the public justice system. It stems from a double murder in Orange County. So there was a kid, 17 years old, shot allegedly two other people, murdered two other people, absconded, left. It was in Delaware, and the sheriff's office said it couldn't ask the public to look for him by name, by picture, because juvenile records are sealed. Juvenile criminal records are sealed. So this gives a pretty limited exemption to that and says if a judge signs off on it, if a suspect is at large, you can put their picture out there. It passed the Senate almost unanimously and moves to the House, past the Senate this week. What else have we got? Let's talk about, this is a bill, House Bill 132. This deals with permits. So right now, I guess if you need a permit from a local government, they can force you to show up in person to get it. Larger companies that operate statewide, this is a problem for them.
Sure.
And Kevin Crutchfield, who is a first-term lawmaker in the House, he owns a sign business. And he says that smaller towns make his company come in person. He wants to be able to have it mailed to him.
That doesn't seem unreasonable.
It doesn't seem unreasonable, although it's always interesting when it's someone's business and they want government to be a little friendlier to them. So this House Bill 132 requires local governments to mail various permits instead of making you pick them up. And we're getting near the end here.
Yeah, we are. We should mention a couple things real quickly. Governor Cooper got to talk to, he talked on a call with the National Governors Association with Vladimir Zelensky on Tuesday. And so he mentioned that at the Council of State meeting, I believe.
Yes, which was, I think, 6 weeks ago that Council of State meeting was. I think Tuesday, we're recording this on Friday, and Tuesday was approximately 8 years ago in North Carolina politics time.
No kidding. I couldn't believe on Tuesday that it wasn't Thursday yet. Also, David Price already popping back up. He's been appointed by Governor Cooper to the Community College Board. Obviously, his long history and his history in academia as well, will serve him well, I think, on the Community College Board.
Yeah, they're looking for a new president for that system still. And by the way, House Bill 149, the Senate added language to that. It was a charter school bill, still is a charter school bill, but now it also says that the community college system president would be confirmable. So the General Assembly would have to confirm whoever gets picked for that. I will recommend one story to y'all. A lot of good journalism, obviously, every week, but the Charlotte Ledger and NC Health News teamed up to report on hospital property taxes. So nonprofit hospitals, they don't have to pay property taxes on land, buildings they own for medical uses. But Atrium Health, which had close to $9 billion in revenue last year, technically, is a county hospital authority. That's how it's organized. It's the Mecklenburg County Hospital Authority. So they don't pay property taxes on any of the property they own, including homes they own. Here's a sentence from the story, again, from Charlotte Ledger, NC Health News. Quote, in fact, one tax-exempt Atrium property in Cornelius is home to a PDQ chicken tenders restaurant. You'll pay taxes when you buy the chicken tenders, but Atrium doesn't pay taxes on the land the restaurant sits on. I find that structure fascinating for again, $9 billion a year.
And problematic.
Entity. So,
yeah.
Bill filing deadline was Thursday in the Senate.
I'm still digging through the piles of stuff that got filed.
Yeah.
There was so much. There was so much.
A lot of stuff. And I mean, we talked earlier about, as soon as Cotham switched, we saw all those anti-trans bills get filed. Some of that may have simply had to do with the fact that the deadline was approaching, because I believe they were all Senate bills, or?
No.
No? Okay.
Not
Excuse me.
Mostly. A couple of them are House bills.
So the bill filing deadline was Thursday in the Senate. You have till next Thursday to sign on to a bill. And since that's coming on a break, I wonder if that'll mean bills have fewer sponsors than they might.
Possibly.
The House filing deadline is April 18th. Next week is spring break. No votes in either chamber.
And I think that covers it, and then some.
Yeah, we still did just over 30 minutes, though, even though we talked about Tricia Cotham for like 15.
Well, anyway, we all hope you have a lovely holiday weekend, if you observe, free from politics.
Right.
Any luck, and we'll be back at it all too soon next week on The Wrap.